Hello friends, and welcome back to Boss Economics World. The only show on the internet where we put on our 3D glasses to look at the 4D chess game of global finance, and usually just end up with a massive headache. Today, we're taking a little trip across the pond in our economic time machine. Set the dial to September 2025. The tea is lukewarm, the skies are grey, and the British economy is conducting a fascinating, real-time experiment in what I like to call the Great British Inflation Bake-Off, where the prize for everyone is paying more for absolutely everything. Our star baker? The new Labour government, led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. After 14 years in the wilderness, they've finally got their hands on the keys to number 11, Downing Street. And what's the first thing they've decided to cook up? A big, beautiful, multi-layered cake of social justice policies. It looks fantastic on the box, folks. It's got layers of higher minimum wages, a thick frosting of enhanced workers' rights, and it's all dusted with a generous helping of new business taxes. There's just one tiny problem. They seem to have forgotten a key ingredient in their recipe, economic reality. And now, the whole thing is threatening to create a soggy bottom for the entire UK economy. So, grab your scones, because we're about to dissect how a government's attempt to be the hero of the working class might just be accidentally setting the stage for an inflationary villain to steal everyone's lunch money. Let's set the scene. It's late 2024. Chancellor Reeves unveils her first budget. The political mandate is clear: after years of conservative austerity and turmoil, the public wants a change. Labour has campaigned on a platform of helping working people. A noble, unassailable goal, right? But here's the first rule of Boss Economics World: every noble political promise has a grubby little price tag attached. Starmer and Reeves have painted themselves into a corner with a classic political masterstroke that is also an economic straitjacket. They've sworn on a stack of manifestos not to raise the big, scary taxes that people notice: income tax, national insurance for employees, or the value-added tax, VAT. This is the political equivalent of a magician promising to pull a rabbit out of a hat without actually owning a hat or a rabbit. So, with a projected budget deficit looming, a £35 billion black hole according to the latest Bloomberg economics calcs, where does a clever chancellor find the cash? Well, you go after the one group that doesn't have a direct vote in the next election: businesses. In her first budget, Reeves pulls two major levers. Lever 1, the employer payroll tax heist. She jacks up employers' national insurance contributions to the tune of a cool £26 billion. Now, on paper, this looks brilliant. You get to stand at the dispatch box and say, "We are not taxing working people, we are asking businesses to pay their fair share." Applause, cheers, headlines secured. But here's the dirty secret that every first-year economics student knows: a tax on a business is almost always a tax on its customers. Businesses are not charities. They are not benevolent social enterprises designed to absorb government-imposed costs out of the goodness of their corporate hearts. When their costs go up, they have three choices. 1. Absorb the cost and make less profit. 2. Cut costs elsewhere. 3. Pass the cost on to the consumer. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, the UK's own fiscal watchdog, wasn't shy about this. They estimated this tax hike alone would add about 0.4 percentage points to inflation. It's a direct injection of cost-push pressure into the system. Lever 2, the minimum wage super spike. The centerpiece of the Labour plan. A sharp, inflation-busting increase in the national living wage. Again, politically, it's a slam dunk. Who could argue against paying the lowest-paid workers more? But this move, combined with the tax hike, creates a dangerous cocktail. Think of it like this: the government is simultaneously increasing the cost of the ingredients, wages, and the tax on the final dish, payroll. For businesses, especially in low-margin sectors like retail, hospitality, and leisure, this is a brutal 1-2 punch. UK Hospitality, the industry group, immediately started screaming about a potential wage price spiral. Pano Christou, the CEO of the ubiquitous sandwich shop Pret a Manger, said the industry was under intense strain. These aren't just crocodile tears, folks. These are businesses staring at their spreadsheets, seeing their razor-thin margins evaporate, and realizing their only escape route is the price tag on your latte and croissant. Fast forward to mid-2025. The results are in. And surprise, surprise, when you increase costs for every business in the country, prices go up. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, which was happily hovering around the Bank of England's 2% target when Reeves took office, has decided to go on a little adventure. It hit 3.8% in July, and the BOE now thinks it'll peak at a spicy 4% in September. Now, 4% might not sound like the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic, but it's double the target. It's a persistent, sticky, and deeply problematic kind of inflation. This isn't the transitory inflation of 2021 caused by supply chain chaos and post-pandemic demand. This is domestically generated, cost-push inflation, baked right into the system by government policy. This is what we call the inflation hydra. The Bank of England spent 2023 and early 2024 heroically trying to slay the post-pandemic inflation monster by jacking up interest rates, crushing demand. They cut off one head. But now, the government's policies have caused two new, uglier heads to grow in its place. 1. The cost push head, this is the direct impact. Businesses like your local pub, your corner shop, your favorite restaurant, they are all facing a tsunami of new costs. The £26 billion payroll tax, the 4.1% minimum wage hike, the end of business rates relief, £1.7 billion hit, a new packaging levy, which the BOE says could add 0.5% to food prices alone, and a new employment rights bill that the government's own analysis admits will cost businesses up to £5 billion. The British Retail Consortium found over half its members expect this bill to jack up their costs. Let's put the £5 billion figure in context. The government study showed this burden would be concentrated on employers in lower-paying sectors. And what did that same study say their main response would be? You guessed it, raise prices. 2. The wage price spiral head, this is the more insidious beast. London Underground drivers are on strike. Why? Because the 3.4% wage hike they've been offered is now below the 3.8% inflation rate. They are losing purchasing power. So they demand more. If they get it, transport for London's costs go up, and ticket prices must rise. Then, the barista who takes the tube to work needs a bigger raise to afford their commute, and the price of your coffee goes up again. Wash, rinse, repeat. This is the doom loop that central bankers have nightmares about. It's what kept Paul Volcker up at night in the 1970s. The BOE's own monetary policy report in August 2025 explicitly blamed higher labor costs for the sharp rise in core goods and food prices, noting that food price inflation in the UK was outpacing the rest of Europe. They're basically flashing a giant neon sign at the Treasury that says, HUI. You're not helping. What we are witnessing here is a classic, textbook case of the government and the central bank driving two cars head-on towards each other on a very narrow road. In the red corner, the government, fiscal policy. Chancellor Reeves is flooring the accelerator. By forcing wages and business costs up, she is effectively injecting stimulus and inflationary pressure into the economy. Her policies are expansionary in nature, even if they're funded by taxes on business rather than by borrowing. In the blue corner, the Bank of England, monetary policy. Governor Andrew Bailey and the MPC are desperately trying to slam on the brakes. They had started cautiously cutting rates from the highs of 2024. But now, with inflation proving stickier than a pot of marmalade, they're being forced to pause. Investors, who had been expecting a smooth series of rate cuts, now don't see another one until February 2026 at the earliest. This is fundamentally dysfunctional. The government is creating inflation, and the central bank is then forced to fight that inflation by keeping borrowing costs high for everyone. And who pays the price for this policy tug-of-war? Everyone. 1. Mortgage holders, higher for longer interest rates mean their monthly payments remain excruciatingly high, squeezing household budgets and stifling the property market. 2. Businesses, not only are their direct costs from the government going up, but their borrowing costs for investment and expansion also remain elevated thanks to the BOE's reaction. It's a double whammy. 3. The government itself. This is the beautiful, painful irony. The high inflation that the government's policies are fueling leads to higher interest rates on government debt, gilts. Simon French at Panmure Liberum pointed this out perfectly. The elevated borrowing costs for long-dated UK government debt are partly due to market fears of persistent inflation. Reeves is trying to fill a £35 billion budget hole, but her own policies are making the government's debt more expensive to service, effectively making the hole deeper. It's like trying to bail out a sinking boat with a bucket that has a hole in it. Let's not forget the ghost at this feast, the Liz Truss/Kwasi-Kwarteng mini-budget of 2022. That was the ultimate cautionary tale. The market saw a government pursuing unfunded, fiscally irresponsible policies and they had a full-blown panic attack. The pound crashed, gilt yields exploded, and the BOE had to intervene to prevent a pension fund meltdown. While Reeves's policies are more death by 1,000 cuts than the fiscal bazooka of the Truss budget, the underlying principle is the same. If international markets lose faith in your ability to manage the economy prudently and control inflation, they will punish you. Swiftly and brutally. The new budget board co-chaired by Manoush Shafik is a clear sign that Downing Street is terrified of a repeat performance and is trying to project an image of adult supervision. So, as Chancellor Reeves prepares her second budget for November 26, she's trapped. She's staring down another massive budget gap, industrial unrest is brewing, and her own policies have made the economic environment worse. She has a few potential paths, none of them particularly pleasant. Path 1, the double down. She could ignore the warnings from the BOE, the OBR, and every business group in the country and pile on more costs. This would be a declaration of war on the central bank and the markets. The result? A nasty bout of stagflation, the toxic 1970s brew of stagnant economic growth and high inflation. The BOE would be forced to hike rates again, crushing what's left of the economy to get the inflation genie back in the bottle. This is the path to a deep recession and a one-term government. Path 2, the U-turn, aka the surrender. She could publicly or privately acknowledge that the tax business, not people's strategy has backfired. This would mean delaying or scrapping some of the planned regulations, offering new tax relief for businesses, and working with the Bank of England instead of against it. This is the economically sensible path. However, it's politically humiliating. It would mean admitting your flagship policies were a mistake less than 2 years into your term and would enrage the left wing of the Labour Party. Path 3, the Great British Muddle-Through. This is the most likely path. Reeves will probably offer some small, tokenistic concessions to business to show she's listening, while largely sticking to her guns. She'll talk tough on controlling public spending while blaming global factors or greedy corporations for the inflation her policies are fueling. The result would be a prolonged period of sluggish growth, sticky inflation just above target, and a slow, painful grind for households and businesses. The UK would avoid a full-blown crisis, but condemn itself to mediocrity. The situation in the UK in 2025 is a masterclass in a fundamental economic truth: there is no magic money tree, and there is no such thing as a consequence-free policy. The Labour government's desire to help low-paid workers and fund public services is laudable. But the method they've chosen, loading up businesses with taxes and costs under the politically convenient fiction that it won't affect working people, is economically naive and ultimately self-defeating. You cannot tax and regulate your way to prosperity. When you make it more expensive to employ people and run a business, you don't get a vibrant, growing economy. You get a stagnant one with higher prices. You create a situation where the central bank has to inflict pain on the entire country just to clean up the inflationary mess created by the Treasury. The great irony is that the very working people Labour wants to help are the primary victims. They pay the price through higher inflation that erodes their wage gains, higher mortgage rates that strain their finances, and reduce job opportunities in a weaker economy. This isn't a uniquely British problem. Governments all over the world are grappling with the same temptation to solve complex structural problems with politically easy, but economically damaging, solutions. So as we watch this drama unfold from our perch here at Boss Economics World, remember this: the road to economic hell is often paved with good intentions. And a policy that sounds great in a stump speech can often turn into a nightmare on a nation's balance sheet. What do you think? Is this smart politics but dumb economics? Or is there a 5D chess move I'm missing? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the beautiful mess of the global economy. Stay cynical, folks.